Welcome back to another episode of the Point Three Podcast. We are your favorite trio of hosts. To my right, we have Spider Brando. Below me, you have Lou and myself, Hero Scroll. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. If it's not, welcome back. Today, we're talking about something that has been a topic of conversation over the weekend. Last week, we are at this point, as of recording, almost a week out from the X-Men 97 finale. It was absolutely fantastic. If you want to know our thoughts, go watch our video on it. But it led us to talking about and ultimately asking the question and realizing that at one point we were in the golden age of the superhero genre, just in general, right? Spanning from games, movies, books, comics, everything in between. But with all the talk recently of some of the flops that have been coming out, for example, the past two, the biggest flops of last year were actually both superhero films, one from DC, one from Marvel with the Marvels and the Flash. So a lot of people talking about that, talking about superhero fatigue. So it led us to really ask the question, are we still in the golden age of superheroes? Lou, I'm going to throw this over to you first. What do you think?
I think it's a simple answer of no. Your two big hitters, the MCU and DCEU, kind of have one ended, and the other one is on a perception decline year over year, film over film, show over show. We'll get to you have a really good point about kind of today's era. However, I think you can really narrow this down to almost 2 decades and kind of pick it apart from there, but at least your 2000 to like 2019, 2020. Yeah, that's a time. I don't know why it sounds weird. I don't like that year 2020. But we'll just say, 19 years of just when you think of people's favorite something, there's a really good chance that it dropped at that time. And it wasn't all just, MCU connected universe, but I think that wave there everyone's poking a lot of holes in today's version of superhero, and you hear superhero fatigue. You hear people aren't jumping to direct this movie or to be casted in that show or something along those lines. And what is TV and streaming? There are a lot of changing moving parts in the last probably 4 or 5 years that you can't put your thumb on it and undisputedly say this is the best it's ever been. I think we've had those times. Um, so Spider Brando, what are you thinking? Still in the golden age of superheroes? Is this a golden age?
It doesn't feel like one post Endgame, but I'm going to say yes, just based on the fact of all things superheroes is still thriving. We're getting game after game after game with Spider-Man 1, 2, Spider-Man 3, Captain America, and that Black Panther game's coming out. I forgot the name of it right at this very moment. There have been some L's, but there is a lot of L's during the original Golden Age of superhero comic run, because not everything is going to hit. Within the last couple years, we have seen some of like the most peak Spider-Man content alone that we've ever gotten to see. So that's a big. I know it's only one superhero, but just as an example, they're still churning out some great content across movies, TV shows for them. Not so much TV shows, but movies, video games. Spidey has been thriving, but you got Superman on the other hand has not been thriving, which has been quite unfortunate. Throughout these this last decade, that'll be fixed soon enough with Superman Legacy or Superman. I keep on calling it Legacy, even though it's not a legacy anymore. But I'd say the legacy is still going on for the golden age of superheroes.
Yeah, both of you making fantastic points for both sides of this conversation. Um, for me though, and I think as we were talking about it more and more and thinking about it, over over the time period that we were talking, I don't think we're in a golden age. Because to me, especially when I hear golden age, as a comic book collector, I think of the golden age of comics and how to have most of those books, it's really kind of unattainable for most people. Like if you want, the first appearance of Batman, first appearance of Superman, you're gonna have to cough up, six figures, a couple million, and again, for most people, that's just not obtainable. And I think in terms of like the superhero genre right now, before Endgame, because I really do think Endgame is such a good marker for that golden age. I don't think that's obtainable again because it was new in certain ways, especially like the MCU. A lot of the DC films, for example, to this day, if you ask someone their favorite DC film, they're probably going to tell you something pre 2019. It's more than likely it's going to have The Dark Knight attached to it, which is completely okay. But those types of things just haven't been topped, and I don't know if they necessarily will be again in the same ways, right? But when I think now, I do think we're in like a silver age where in the silver age it was a lot of creations of newer things that started saving, for example, like Marvel. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, where they're experimenting with new stuff and a lot of it might not hit, but a lot of it could. And I do think that's how the superhero genre is, right? Especially as a whole, because for example, Spider-Brand, you were talking about how we've gotten the most peak, the Spider-Man content, and for sure, right? And in terms of animation and video games, we have, but for every Spider-Man 2, we get Marvel's Avengers. For every Spider-Man 2, we get Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, right? And obviously, those games have bigger problems beyond just the superhero genre, right? Those are more issues with gaming as a whole, but it does hurt the entire genre, right? The entire image of superheroes. So while we're not in a golden age, I do think we're in a silver age, and I do think that's still a very good place to be in. I just think it's going to take a little more time for people to really look back at it and be more fond of it. Because I think right now, and as it tends to be when we're in the present, we don't appreciate what we have as much. But again, we look back at some of the stuff that we've had since last year, and the years prior. We've gotten some things, I think, like Spider-Man, like you said, that are just fantasies come to life. I don't think anybody ever thought we would see all three live action Spider-Man on screen. I don't think we ever thought we would see Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman on screen together, but here we are. I don't think we would ever see a DC universe that feels like it could work, but here we are. We never thought we would get another great Wolverine game, yet we're a couple years away from one. So,
you just said something there that's very interesting from the perspective of when we look back on certain things, you're just like, oh man, that actually is really good. But when you take phase 3 of the MCU, I feel like that is peak, all-time peak golden age for superheroes, specifically because you had a really high functioning cinematic universe that people were heavily invested in, and that kind of spurred people to expect that superhero movies were going to be really good. Point in case, 2016, you have Deadpool, Batman versus Superman, Captain America Civil War, X-Men Apocalypse, Suicide Squad, Doctor Strange. Then in 2017, we're getting Logan, Guardians 2, Wonder Woman, Spider-Man Homecoming, Ragnarok, Justice League, for better or worse, but anticipation was super high for that movie. Then 18, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Deadpool 2, Incredibles 2, Venom, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Aquaman, Captain Marvel, Shazam, Avengers Endgame. Like, you're getting billion-dollar movies and movies that are extremely well perceived, great box office. People look back on it and it's standing the test of time. Like, to me, that's the core chunk of, like, it's not just the MCU, although the MCU is extremely high functioning and doing something no one's ever done. It was extremely unprecedented. You still had really good DC movies, Logan finishes, and Fox is still doing its thing. To me, that is like a 3-year stretch to where it was great when you look at it. We move out of it and you look back on it and it's like a times 10 multiplier. You're like, damn, we haven't had anything like that. Like, we loved it, but we might have taken it for granted still.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, we've said it here before, but it's like social media wasn't as loud as it is now. The pandemic obviously changed that and gave people a lot more people started jumping on it to start voicing, what they thought, and that's great. But with all the positive reception comes negative as well. And I think, as we've said before, the negative tends to be louder. But back then, this wasn't a thing, so it was really just pure positive reception in a time where, again, box office was just going crazy for all these films.
And I think the other thing to that too, from a social media perspective, is you didn't see anything like this before. So it was hard for people to be loud, because I feel like now today, a loud majority is hearkening back to that 3-year stretch of, I wish I felt like that. I wish these movies were like that. I wish I could go back in time and experience everything I felt the first time I watched Deadpool, the first time I got my tickets for Infinity War, the time when Logan was done and I was like, oh my gosh, did that just blow our minds? Joker with Joaquin Phoenix comes out and you're like I feel unwell after watching it. Like, you felt something during that 3-year stretch that I think people are seeking that to this day. And I think it comes out over time when we have those loud majority who are like, this is garbage. This is what typically what follows that is, in comparison to, insert a movie from the phase 3 timeline.
And that's why I say I think we're still in a very good time period, right? Just because these negative perceptions are loud, when you really start thinking about it, the past couple of years have been absolutely great. And I mean, and maybe Spider-Man, you can attest or talk about this a little more, but how many times have we heard, wow, this is the best thing since Endgame in the past, 4 years? Including right now with X-Men 97.
There's been a lot of hate though, or there has been a lot of, it's the worst thing since like Justice League though, which sucks. Like Morbius, Madam Web, and all the Sony outliers is what I was getting at.
True, but here's why I also say we're maybe getting past the point of the negative being as loud, because yes, we know Madam Web was not good, but let's be honest, do we think about Madam Web?
I thought about it so much that I started watching it last night and I was like, what am I doing? I put it on my wife and I was like, are you reading right now? And she's like, oh yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, here's a quick question to that. Do you think that we're turning the corner because people have finally accepted that carryover isn't going to happen and that it is not the same? Like, if people just come to the realization that golden age that is done and we maybe can get there again, but it's a shifting of perspective of looking for that next, this is amazing, and we don't find it, and we do, you think it kind of goes like, great project, and then you get like a handful of just like, what did I just watch? And then you're like, oh, that's pretty good. And then it's a great project, and then you're like, oh, maybe this one's going to be great. And you're like, no, it wasn't. That expectation, going back to phase 3, is like every single movie is an event. You get your tickets, you go, it's $1 billion. You have a row of your friends, you have all your people. That is something, pandemic included, that if we start getting back to that again, then I would say, okay, maybe we're back. But my question to you guys is can we have a golden age without having a high functioning cinematic universe? I'm including games, TV shows, movies. We know streaming's running rampant right now. Like, is it possible to do that in today's day and age without having a massive box office present from one of the big two, MCU or now DCU?
It definitely makes it harder because a lot of people, it's just easier for people to walk to the movies as compared to buying like a $500 console and a $60 game to play Spider-Man 2 that I may or may not have done. But like as cheap or not as not cheap as tickets are, they're still a lot cheaper to go to the theater and get consumed or pick up a streaming service and get consumed based off of the like what's been established in these universes already. But if you get like the Batman, that's kind of standalone. It's not everybody flocking to go pick up the Batman like games or merch and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that form of thinking, but I just look at Spider-Man 2 as an example of the game. I mean, it sold. What was it? I brought it up in 24 hours, more than 2.5 million copies in a day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A 24-hour period. I think the last sales record it hit was back in February, up to 10 million. And that was, I think, in like 90 days of the game being out. 90 to like 100 days. Which is an insane amount. An insane. You look at what X-Men 97 is doing, and I guarantee you when the numbers come out for that, and, you know, people really put that into perspective with everything else, it's going to be huge. You look at Invincible coming out, how big that was for Amazon, The Boys. I think it's possible without a box office. I really do. Because I think when everything else starts thriving, that's when you're also in. It could be considered another period of the golden age. You look at also comic books. I mean, this year, I know, again, another Spider-Man related project, but it's still booming with Ultimate Spider-Man #1. And I think how many people are now into comic books because of that, and how many other series and characters are now going into second and third printings because of the excitement that they generate. So I do absolutely think it's possible without a huge box office presence.
I agree. In that, it goes, for me personally, it's when I think of the previous golden age, it was the quantity of film, but it necessarily wasn't the quality of film, right? People were chasing those movies and they kept showing up, and the numbers reflected that there was a high interest. But both of you guys have always said something very interesting, and this kind of ties into our previous video, so definitely go check it out because we've talked about all of these things in depth. Video game, animation, streaming. Those three spaces are growing rapidly. And you see that with Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse, X-Men 97 now, right? So you have a box office presence, you have your streaming presence, games, to your point, are selling like crazy. The quality of these projects are increasing. And I think now the people who are in those shoes to create are very talented, and they always have been, of course. But these projects are taking you back decades. X-Men 97 is a great example. I want to read, I want to know, I want to understand something from Claremont's runner. I want to go back and understand what made the X-Men so great in the 80s and 90s and those things. I think that is what can be a part of the golden age of superheroes, is saying, hey, all of this has existed. Now people are just conscious and aware that there's more than just an MCU. There's more than just box office movies. It's been here, but we also have the ability to create new. And I think the way that we see it in the future is just your ability to consume all of these, to your guys' point, through various mediums, and it's high quality. that is what didn't exist from 2016 to 2019, which is very possible moving forward. To me, that resonates. Just and the only other thing that I'll say to the point of like being in the silver transitional phase, and I'll ask you guys this one last question. A lot of people say, well, the MCU did it. The games, they've done it. Spider-Man 2, it's been done, right? Can it happen again? I think people underestimate how many superheroes are actually out there and that haven't been adapted in a way that we expect everyone to adapt any superhero story, like Invincible, The Boys. What else did you mention? There's tons of things that are going. Even Spider-Man to this point, like how many banger Spider-Man things did you guys just throw out there? And you're like, but it's Spider-Man. Like he's one of the most well-known characters in anything, and you're still like, oh my gosh, like they actually did that. That's what also gives me hope, is maybe now they can kind of reach into the well a little bit deeper and keep pulling some of these characters who've never gotten adaptations in any form, or they have, and it just was a lower quality. That's my big thing. Quality exists.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Are we still in a golden age? Are we going to experience a renaissance of a golden age? Are we in a silver age? Again, just let us know what you think down in the comments below. But thank you for listening. Again, subscribe to us if you haven't joined us on our social medias, where we talk about all this in more in depth for sure. But until next time, there are 3 things that you need to keep doing. You need to keep watching, you need to keep reading, and you need to keep nerding out. We will see you guys next time.